And as I mentioned, my name is Chris Sullivan. I'm the Executive Director of the Southwest Conservation District. We work with municipalities throughout this area, including East Haven. And this conversation tonight, the Zoom meeting, is focusing on the conceptual planning and idea of building a Greenway trail along the Farm River. And we're working with the town and a consultant, Fussin O'Neill, to start this conversation with folks about their interest. Michael, could you advance the slide? All right, I changed the volume a little bit to make it louder. Sorry, Carl. Having some issues with my audio. So hopefully people can hear me a little bit better now. But what we're gonna do.
Yes, thank you.
Yep, perfect. What we're gonna do tonight is a little bit of an introduction of where we are and how this project came about, the background of what we're looking at tonight for the Greenway, and then some conceptual images and ideas of what the trail system could look like. And at the very end, the most important part is we want to hear, feedback, question and answer about this project and what this project could look like moving forward. So there's definitely gonna be time for feedback. The recording of this meeting will be shared out to everybody that registered, and it'll also be posted on our website, as well as the slides themselves will also be posted. We want to make sure that this information gets out to as many possible people in the area, so there's a high level of awareness of this project. Michael, you can advance. So as I mentioned, the Southwest Conservation District, we are a natural resource-based nonprofit entity. We work in 43 municipalities, including East Haven, North Branford, Branford. We work with municipal staff, individual citizens, agricultural producers, and work on anything in the environmental field, water quality issues, invasive plants, anything along those lines. So we're very excited about this project and the potential for the Greenway Trail. And I have to definitely thank the Greater New Haven Green Fund, who provided the financial resources to do this opportunity and develop these concepts. We're lucky enough to get chosen for funding from a competitive grant process with them. So we wouldn't be able to be at this point without them. And so we're very excited and thank them for this funding. Go ahead, Michael. So just a little bit of background of how we got here. A lot of folks on this call were involved in developing the Farm River watershed-based plan. And part of that was doing stream walking and going along the river throughout the watershed. And this is a map of the entire Farm River watershed. The red circle down at the bottom is kind of pretty close to the area that the Farm River Greenway Trail could exist. And on one of the days when we were out doing stream walking, several of us came across these parcels that just went right along the river. A lot of them seemed like they may have been used for and cleared before in the past. And after a little bit more research, we learned that the town of East Haven owns all these parcels. And there's an easement or a right of way for the sewer line to go through there. And so on top of this area, it seemed like a great potential opportunity to create an area to that would benefit the neighborhood for walking and connection to the river as a resource, and also potential for improving water quality and just access to the river itself. So as I mentioned, we were able to get funding from the Greater New Haven Green Fund to do this concept design work. We've hired Fussin O'Neill to develop those concept designs. And tonight they're gonna show us what they've come up with over the time from some more field work that we did out in the area, and pitch these ideas of what the Greenway Trail could look like along the Farm River. I think that might be my last slide. So Michael, you can advance. And if it is, I'll turn it over to Michael Soares, who is the lead consultant working on this from Fussin O'Neill, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for being here. It's exciting to have, the folks that we've worked with already on the Farm River Watershed Management Plan here, and then other people from other organizations or just neighbors in this area that are interested in this project. I certainly want to thank, like right off the bat, Southwest Conservation District for bringing this project to us. And sort of, we had this idea when we were developing the plan, and we were able to just kind of put it into a design pretty quickly, thanks to Chris finding this funding. Also want to just say thank you to the town of East Haven for being on board right away, for just at least going through this conceptual design process on the land. And also the Greater New Haven Water Pollution Control Authority. These are town-owned parcels, we think, really to help protect that infrastructure. And they've also been open to this design process and considering what other uses the land could have. And just seeing where it is, we're zoomed out a bit over that area. And so you can get a rough idea of the parcels in town that we are looking at. There, I believe, are about 7 town-owned parcels. It's about 1.5 miles long through here, from the north end at the top of the image to the south end. The faded background is just the neighborhood and the other areas around the project area. You can see Lake Saltonstall to the east, and the recreation area also to the east. Grannis Pond off to the west, and the Farm River is sort of that blue line, mostly on the east side of the parcels that we're going to be discussing as we go through our concept design. And I just want to note one thing in this image, because I think it really shows the amount of residential neighborhoods that are near this area. And so it did look like when we were at these sites that it's already being used unofficially as a trail system. And so you can just see that there's a lot of people in the area that could, if there's other pedestrian infrastructure, that they could quickly access these areas. And so we have been talking about a trail a little bit. We also looked at and are proposing some restoration concepts that would really focus on 3 different areas of restoration, focusing on improving water quality, increasing flood storage capacity along the river in wetlands and in floodplains, and overall improving and diversifying the habitats that are present in this corridor. And just to go back up in our text here, we are in a riparian zone. Riparian zones are a mix of terrestrial and aquatic systems, but we're also going to be talking about the larger river corridor, which includes the riparian zone, but also uplands, even neighborhoods that are or homes that would be very close to the river. So just to try to, ecologists now talk about a river not just as the waterway or as its banks and its riparian area, but as its corridor. And so this Greenway is really trying to maximize a number of uses, ecological and societal uses for that river corridor. And so we have essentially 5 distinct areas, maybe 7 or 8 town parcels through here, about 1.5 miles long. There's a mix of upland and wetland habitats. A lot of it is within the 100-year floodplain. And we'll see more detail as we go through each of the areas. Just to say, if you have any clarifying questions as I'm going through the slides, please feel free to unmute and speak up if you just want me to clarify something. If you have a question that's going to be a little bit more of a discussion, we will have plenty of time at the end to address those kinds of questions. But I think we're a small enough group. If you have something that you want to cover quickly, we can certainly do that. I'm also joined here by my colleague Beth Kermsey, who is one of our lead landscape architects at Fuss & O'Neill. And so Beth and I are going to trade back and forth a little bit, talking about sites and whether we're talking about the restoration concepts or the trail concepts that you're going to see at each section. So we're going to start from the north end of the Greenway, or the proposed Greenway, and then work our way down south through essentially 5 different areas until we get to the southern end, just south of Willow Road. So this first section is just north of Corbin Road. There are 2 town-owned parcels that are slightly separated. The larger one is the river, but also a forested wetland system. And so I'm going to turn it over to Beth to talk a little bit about the trail and other amenities here, and then I'll pick up on restoration.
Thanks, Michael. And thanks everybody for having us here tonight. This is a really exciting opportunity to discuss this project. Michael and another colleague and I from Fuss and O'Neill had the chance to walk the site just before the cold set in this fall. And what a tremendous asset you have in your town. And, you know, walking it and realizing that, you know, maybe there are some people that have found this ahead of time and maybe you're on this call. So you already know the potential here for a really exciting stretch of trail, almost 2 miles long, that could exist to accommodate a number of different recreational experiences and experiences in different types of natural settings. So in this first section, we were really struck by the opportunity to engage with this riparian forest. The area has a number of opportunities for the trail to meander through it, to engage some slightly more upland areas, to experience the forest, and also to get close to the river as well. There is the possibility that an additional path could be threaded in along the riverbank that would be accessible during drier periods, and then there would be this pink line would show the trail through the area in all seasons. And for this segment of trail, you'll see a number of spots where we've identified potential parking spots. It's not necessary to have parking at every single spot that we identified, but we've identified potential ones for further discussion and review. This one, however, has high value in our opinion. This trailhead would enable people, one, to access the trail at one end. So if you were going to access it to go for a run, you could come to this one and get a 4-mile run in if you did the entire thing. Additionally, there's already street frontage that's owned, which is fantastic, on North High Street. And it's also apart from the neighborhood. So if people were visiting this trail system that, you know, they weren't just walking out for an after dinner stroll or an early morning run or, you know, a lunchtime visit to the river, it could be a place where, you know, non-direct residents could feel comfortable coming, parking their car, and then enjoying the trail. The only downside to a parking spot in this area might be that the pedestrian bridge is required over the river itself, and that does carry a price tag with it. That maybe that's something that happens in a later phase. But at any rate, this also this trail area has the ability to be expanded over time and make connections to a trail system that might extend to the north a little bit more. There's the possibility of building connections into the neighborhood, and also building a connection over to the rec field that you could see in that first slide. Some of the things that would be required in this area, we'd definitely recommend trail signage. And there's probably the need for a couple of boardwalks, you know, small boardwalks that would allow egress along the trail over wet spots during the wet season, just so that you could ensure that the trail was able to be used all year long. So where it exits onto Corbin Road, that area is right along the river. And then from there, we would recommend walking along the sidewalk and then across, having a road crossing. And we'll talk about that next section next, but I'll hand this back over to Michael to talk a little bit more about the area of proposed restoration.
Thanks, Beth. Just to follow up on what Beth said about a trailhead at this location. We did look a lot at the residential neighborhood on the east side and looking for a way for a trail to connect. It is in denser neighborhoods, you know, it's difficult to sometimes squeeze a trail in between homes or find adequate parking. And so this might not be where the parking is here on North High and the pedestrian bridge, that might not be the most cost-effective approach. And conversations with neighbors may create access for that neighborhood to the east that you don't even need parking for. But for what we could identify in this initial concept design, it seemed the most possible to be putting it on North High, but there could be some other options off to the east as well. And just really quick there, you'll see there's a slight separation between these two parcels. It's an undeveloped parcel in between those two. The trail would just need some sort of trail easement to grant access across that property or an acquisition of that property. So which is easements and small acquisitions like that are quite common. So the restoration concept for this particular area, if you can see the dashed green circle just east to the south of the trail, there's a stormwater outfall there, a concrete pipe, which probably failed. And as water leaked out of the pipe, it started undermining the pipe and then created a fairly substantial gully. I would say it's anywhere from 3 feet deep to about 7 feet deep, right where the existing pipe is. Sections of pipe have fallen into that gully, and it's actively eroding. And so when we look at something like that, we see it as an infrastructure issue, but we can also see it as a water quality issue. Sedimentation is considered, at certain points, at certain volumes, can be considered a pollutant. So if there's ways to address that, stabilize that location, improve that outfall so that it's not actively eroding, and there could be some flow reduction measures taken in that restoration of that site to slow the water down. A lot of what we want to try to do in a watershed restoration, whether it's small or the larger scale that the management plan talks about, is to try to infiltrate water before it gets into surface waters and try to slow stormwater flow down or stop it altogether through infiltration practices. And so this would be a way to stabilize an eroding location and try to slow that flow down before it discharges into the Farm River.
And if I could just add, so we tried to bring the trail to these interventions because they can be designed in a way that it's an exciting feature along the trail. They don't need to be hidden away, and you know, stormwater doesn't need to always be underground. It can be something that's really exciting to come upon and see it in action, and you know, and to engage the trail with it so that it's that point of interest. I should also mention too, on this trail, in the first example of this, I think, if Michael, you wouldn't mind going back, just right in that section after the easement, which thank you for adding that, Michael. Where that easement is, as you come across, there's a view right into the neighboring properties that we would suggest be screened extensively so that the neighbor had privacy from any you know, visitors to the trail. And that happens a number of times down the trail system, the proposed trail system. So there is that existing right of way, but because it is open visually, it would require some additional planting to, or in some cases a fence, to create that privacy for the residents so that they didn't have to feel like people were visiting this trail system in their yard.
Yeah, we'll see some of that coming forward too, and we'll have some example images of what some types of screens that could be used in those areas. And thank you, Beth, for mentioning having the trail be integrated with these restoration practices. I think it's an opportunity for the town and the Conservation District, anybody else interested in water quality and restoration projects related to the Farm River, is to not only have people out here utilizing the space and walking, but even be part of some restoration projects as volunteers. There's a lot of opportunities for interpretive education signs about the Farm River, about stormwater, about floodplains. I could go on and on.
One man, one vote.
Really a lot of opportunities with this particular set of sites, and it could be part of the initiative to get more people aware and interested in the Farm River and water quality. So just some quick photos of the site. The two on the right are the failed outfall. You can see the top right image where the pipe has fallen in. The bottom right picture, you can see Beth and Elsa standing on top of, kind of almost on top of the pipe, and then that gully where we have this active erosion issue as a result of that failed pipe. The two on the left are just sort of giving you a sense of what the forested wetland and the neighboring property, and also sort of where the town property starts. And just to give you a sense of some images of what we think it could look like in terms of the trail, suspended boardwalks or more pedestrian bridges that connect to an established trail. The bottom right picture might just look like a stone-lined stream, but that is a constructed surface flow path for stormwater designed to slow the flow down and incorporate vegetation into that conveyance, so that the vegetation and the rocks slow the water down, take the nutrients or sediments out before it joins the river. So these are referred to as regenerative stormwater conveyances. And we've had a number of locations in the watershed that we think this type of practice might work. And so just showing you an example, they look quite natural once they are established and have existed even just for a year. They can look quite natural very quickly. Okay, moving on. We have area number 2. So this is a narrow parcel just south of Corbin going down to Hellstrom Road. So it's a fairly narrow parcel. I'll let Beth go back into the trail opportunities here.
Sure. So feel free to move to the next slide as I talk to. As we walked this portion of the trail, it's rather narrow, and I think that the neighbors there will probably have some privacy concerns. The trail, the current maintained right-of-way follows the top of the slope, so it's above the river, and you're looking down at it. It would be very difficult to get down to the river's edge from here, and so I think the pictures on the top show the way that the trail is currently maintained, or this right of way is currently maintained, which would lend itself to a trail very nicely. And then you can look in the bottom right hand corner. There's fencing that looks directly into residents' backyards, and we're very we're cognizant of potential privacy issues here. I think that this segment of the trail could be designed so that it encouraged movement through it and not a lot of places of rest. So we wouldn't be proposing any benches or gathering spots along this segment of trail. Instead, we probably want to include funding for a privacy fence, if that's what the community agreed upon, or there's opportunities for a green fence that can be a vegetated fence, whether that's a hedge or vines grown specifically on a fence structure. Alternatively, I have seen with some conditions like this on other projects where the grant funds or the funding for the trail offers a grant to residents to install screen planting on their own property abutting the trail, so that they have choice over the plant material, and can be an active participant in creating that privacy screen for them. As a connection to the rest of the trail system, I think it's a very important connection. It is a very level piece where the trail is. Getting from Hellstrom to Corbin, like I said, if it's designed to encourage movement, so maybe long, linear, north-south oriented curbing, keeping the path narrow enough so that you can allow people to move, to pass each other, but not so wide that the more narrow the path is, the faster people will move through it. So really choreographing movement through this area, just because it is a situation where you don't have very much access to the river, except maybe there could be a small switchback to get people down to the river, during the drier season. It engages a green infrastructure or proposed restoration area along the way, but it need not be one that inspires a contemplative moment or a pause in movement. Although there is potential there because of the steep grade to make it exciting and maybe introduce a cascade into that. That could be a pretty exciting feature to encounter along this trail. But I think maybe if you go ahead 2 slides, we could look a little bit at those green screens and fencing ideas. So in the top left, it's enhanced with evergreen planting. In the bottom left, there's buffer planting, and there's the idea that you could have planting growing up and over the path to increase that sense of, basically we're creating a tunnel of sorts. But if it's a vegetated tunnel, that's very, it's engaging. Yeah, I'll leave the outfall discussion for Michael, but oh, I suppose I should talk, if we go back to the map, sorry to bounce you around so much.
That's okay.
So that is the parking identified here is a potential parking spot. It would be possible to pull a couple cars off of Hellstrom Road so that there was a spot where people could park close to the trail. Although this one is relatively close to the neighbor, and so it's not our first choice of locations, but certainly, it's one that is a possibility, and so worth looking at. So,
And,
Michael, I'll turn it over to you.
No, that's great. We always feel like it's clear cut, but there's always a lot to say about each of these. One thing I'm not sure, maybe Beth covered this and I missed it, but we have these little green arrows you could see at the top of this parcel and the top of the last one. And these are just places where we thought if this Greenway was established and other networks were possible, we sort of identified places where a trail could head off either using a road or onto another parcel. For example, the one coming off this parcel going west on Corbin Road would take a pedestrian or a walker onto North High, crossing North High onto some town land that's across North High Street. I believe it's town, it's municipal or state land. So we were just seeing that there were other potential open spaces to connect, but we haven't included those in here, but those are just locations where some of those thoughts could be considered a little more.
Yeah, there are a number of parcels heading off to the west that are contiguous with the stream that's identified with the dashed blue line. And so there's that possibility that maybe there is an extensive, greenway network that could be built off of this spine in the future.
And thank you for mentioning that blue dash, that is Maloney Brook, tributary to the Farm River. It comes in from the west side of the watershed. And the reason we've identified a restoration practice here is, I'll go to the next slide. If you can look in the lower left photo, it's a little hard. It was hard to get a good photo of this site. We're standing about 10 feet above the water surface for the river here. And you can't see, you can see sort of that circular pipe standing vertically, that cylinder. That's about a 3-foot wide culvert, concrete culvert pipe. And this is where Maloney Brook enters into the Farm River. And that last section of the streams, the buried stream section, has disengaged and has fallen in, and the pipe that's still there has been undermined a bit. So all is to say is that sometimes these concrete culverts, when they've been installed for decades, they're reaching the end of their lifespan. And without the undermining underneath the pipe that is still there, so you now have the water that's falling, I don't know if maybe it was falling a foot or so into the Farm River. And so there's an opportunity here for repairing that outfall, that pipe that's conveying Maloney Brook, and also rebuilding the bank and maybe stabilizing it or armoring the bank in that immediate area to protect the bank. If this continues for years and years and years, the bank will continue to erode backwards. And if you look in these other images, we haven't really talked about this yet, but a lot of the, because there is a sewer main going through these properties, the Water Pollution Control Authority needs to access and maintain that infrastructure. And so they've kept a pretty good cleared access path through all of these parcels. And that's where we're talking about the trail could be located, is there's really not much other flat area that could be used in this section. And so that could be the trail location. And if Maloney Brook, if this pipe continues to fail where Maloney Brook joins the Farm River, there could be a compromise of the sewer main many, many years from now. But we do see the bank under the existing concrete outfall pipe as sort of being eroded and undermined. And so it is something that would be addressed at some point. And it does appear that they've tried to armor the bank and sort of protect this location, but we do still have erosion happening here. And so of just a very general example of what it could look like to repair that outfall is in the lower right, where the structure itself is repaired, and then again, stone or some other armoring could be used to dissipate the flow as it's entering into the Farm River. Okay, area 3, this is between Hellstrom and Hellstrom, which confused some of us new to your town a little bit at first. We were trying to figure out which side of Hellstrom we were on, but this is quite an interesting area. The town has about maybe it's a 15-acre parcel here between Hellstrom and Hellstrom. It is a bit of a forested bank along the river. And then there is about 12 or so acres of an agricultural field that's partially owned by the town and then partially not owned by the town. And if we had other mapping on here, you could see that there are mapped wetland soils in this part of the town-owned property. It's also well within the 100-year floodplain for the area. And it's common to see floodplains be converted into agricultural areas. These are not prime farmland soils, so it does appear that this would work better from an ecological point of view anyway, as a floodplain, as a restored floodplain. And so actually, I am jumping way ahead to our next slide. I apologize. I'm gonna hold that thought, sorry. And we'll talk more about trails here. Sorry, go ahead, Beth.
No, that's all right, Michael. I think that it's important to think about the context of this one, because whereas in other segments of the trail, we're talking about enhancing an existing condition, here we're really talking about allowing this landscape to return to really serve its purpose along the Farm River in a way that it it currently is being encouraged not to. I think as far as water quality and also the absorption of storm flows goes, this is the biggest opportunity that we identified along this entire system for making some real improvements to the Farm River. Like Michael said, these soils definitely they are hydric, and so I too will stop and go back to the trail, but I think it was really important to set the stage for that and our approach to it in this situation, because it is a little bit different from the way that this is the most drastic spot. So in this segment, there's an opportunity if there's going to be a node, a gathering node, or a place, a park space. Nobody goes to a node, right? They go to a park. It's not this recreation space. There's really an opportunity here to shape an amenity for the community. And whether that happens as part of an early phase or is just something that is tucked into your back pocket and is a possibility down the road. It just, this knob of land where the Farm River bends around would really lend itself to that kind of experience. And part of the reason that it would is because in this situation, so between the P for the parking and the red star, there's a significant grade change there that's non-navigable for a pedestrian. And so in this case, even though the right-of-way that exists and is inspiring this trail system, there's no way to get from point red star to point P without scaling a wall. So what we would have to do in this spot is to direct people out along Hellstrom Road, down along North High Street for just a short segment. And then we would need to obtain an easement over that agricultural property into the town property. And whether that's a trail or a small driveway entrance to a parking spot that could serve this recreational park. Part of the other reason that it would be a great spot for a recreational park is that a lot of this has to be planted. And that could be done specifically to around a design for picnic areas, maybe a hammock village, maybe even a playground. Could you move to the next slide, Michael? Thanks. Oh, sorry. Oh, no.
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so like 8 slides later.
What
so
are you looking
the
for?
playground and the hammock village. So sorry, the amenities.
Okay.
This portion of the trail has a lot of information packed in. So maybe it's just like a small climbing structure, but if families were visiting this area, it could be a destination that you could walk to and feel safe at if you lived in the neighborhood, or you could drive there and safely unload as a family in a protected lot away from the traffic on the main street. And maybe there's just a small recreational amenity here, or something like a hammock village, which really can transform a gathering spot or recreational spot. It's colorful and it's exciting to be in hammocks, and it's a bring your own, so there's a low cost point. So as long as you supply the hooks and the posts. And then there's also the trail system that could be developed with a number of opportunities to engage the river. And the river could be engaged for fishing, or just for, dipping your feet in the summer months, or, going down to the river's edge to look at the winter conditions. It's a really dynamic spot. And there's a lot of potential for people to want to be there and engage with it. Additionally, we saw the opportunity to weave that trail through, as I guess we can go back to the map if you want to, sorry to traverse a million slides here. But you can see with the pink dots, we were thinking that you could traverse the trail so through this system so that people could engage with the reconstruction of a riparian forest and watch it grow over time. It's really exciting to come back to a place year after year and see the transformations in the landscape. I mean, you know, how are the trees that were planted growing? And it's also a place that might be a really good spot to engage a lot of volunteers to help replant some of this riparian forest. And then of course we have some suggested access points down to the river through the established riparian forested edge, which is just a really nice, it's flat. The trees are almost sculptural because they've responded to flooding, and they've responded to those conditions over time, and just a really beautiful spot that could be celebrated in this overall trail system. So Michael, I'll stop waxing poetically and hand it back to you.
Okay. That was good waxing though. So yeah, we split this into 2 slides on trail and restoration just because there are so many opportunities here, and it's a fairly large parcel relative to the others in the project. And I just want to back up a little bit in terms of converting farmland into riparian forest or floodplain, and just say, you know, this is not to prioritize really anything over a farmer's, you know, viability or farming in general. You know, I have farmers in my family. I think farms are the backbone of our region. But when we think about sort of what's the best use, we really think holistically about the best use of certain pieces of land. The best use for this part of this piece of land adjacent to the river, within the floodplain. We saw ponding there both times that we were there, in the cornfield, you know, in the soils. You can make those soils work for agriculture, but it does seem that the best use for this would be to provide additional flood storage for the river when it overflows. We even have, there would need to be a little more of a detailed investigation, but it does appear that if you see the blue arrow at the north end of the parcel, and then another one near the south end going back into the Farm River, we do think that, well, it's worth exploring that an overflow, when the river is high, that an armored overflow could be created to send that overflow water, that flooding water, into the restored floodplain. And it would have a chance to fill that vegetated floodplain, be stored, be slowed by the vegetation that would be established there, and then re-enter the river down below. That's essentially what floodplains have done naturally for millennia. And the idea here would be to provide some flood storage here. Flood storage not only helps slow down those flood events, they also can help remove pollutants, nutrients, and sediment and things like that from the surface water. And so that's our objectives here, is to manage the water quantity in terms of flood conditions, improve the water quality, and then by reestablishing vegetation that could be both forest and other types, of increasing habitat significantly. I would say if just the green sort of restoration area, I think, is about a 12-acre area. And just really quick, we've had these cost estimates in each concept. Cost estimates on the restoration concepts are quite large, and that is deliberate depending on the scale of that particular restoration that is undertaken. If volunteers or donations are a part of that, that's going to bring costs down quite a bit. You know, the 450,000 here, that's really if just everything is costed out in terms of the work. We also are seeing, you know, costs change a lot right now with supply chain and other things. So I realize that the ranges are large. We're just trying to give a rough idea of what some of these would be if they're fully implemented. So here's some of the existing conditions of the farm field, the riparian area next to the river, and the conditions. It is shrubby and forested along the river. I would say for maybe 30 to 75 feet, depending on the location. And then we get into the farm field. So that 30 to 75 foot buffer, that's important in terms of catching any runoff from an agricultural field and slowing it down before it gets into the river itself. I think at a minimum, the existing buffer could be greatly restored. But we're trying to be a little more ambitious and say the entire parcel could be a restored floodplain. And just some examples of that overflow structure I mentioned earlier, and 2 people restoring a floodplain, which is going to take them a bit of time. But Beth's point about coming back to a site and seeing trees grow, I've done that, and it's immensely satisfying to see a tree that you planted or you saw it planted 5 or 10 years ago just really take off. That's always been an exciting thing for me. Okay, so area 4 is below Hellstrom going down to Willow. A little bit of a wider area. Actually, the restoration area identified here is quite wide. But again, I'll let Beth, you can go ahead first on some trail opportunities here.
Sure. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the proposed parking areas. And once again, these are just areas to explore. The 2 in the upper right-hand corner, we recognized are really part of the neighborhood fabric and could potentially be seen as, it's as an intrusion to the neighborhood. Another opportunity for the one all the way to the top might be an extension of the trail park system. That parcel is back from the river a little bit, and it would enable more of a destination to be developed there, and it might be something that it might house a play structure. It might house something more innovative, like a BMX riding trail. And the recreational opportunities are, there's a myriad of opportunities for that parcel. So that exists. I know that if my kids lived in the town, they would be advocating for an RC track, because we've recently gotten into that. So I know that they would be saying, oh, you should turn that into, get all the kids with their RC cars out. Anyway, so potential parking areas, although maybe not of the highest value. The trail through the system from Hellstrom to Willow is great, because that segment with the enhanced restoration project buffering it against the neighborhood to the west, there's extensive vegetation as well. It really becomes an immersive experience in nature, and an opportunity to walk along the farm river and enjoy it as an amenity. In this section, we probably would need a couple of boardwalk sections to get people over low spots, but that's part of the excitement and the variety in a trail. To experience that kind of change. I think I'll let Michael talk more about the green infrastructure, but if that were allowed to flood and to absorb some of the flood waters, or provide water quality treatment along the way, it really becomes something that every time you go there, it's going to be a different experience. It'll be a different way to engage that landscape. There will be, the water will be at different levels. Every time you go, and the vegetation will respond to that, and it would be a really exciting experience, natural experience through that area.
Yeah, this section, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say, I think I got it all for this.
I think so. This was a really, it was a nice section. The floodplain along the river where we have the trail and this restoration area. It's wide. It's probably the section that had the least overall dominance of invasive plant species. We haven't talked about that yet, but I would say most of these parcels, even a basic volunteer or more funded endeavor could be some invasive species management on any of these parcels. But this one seemed to just have a nice forested overhead canopy and really not a lot on the ground to kind of create a lot of dense vegetation with multiflora rows or anything like that. It was really a nice open kind of grassy herbaceous floodplain, and it might be nice in spring and early summer when things are in bloom. I'm not sure. And so our restoration here was that it's probably doing a fairly good job as wetlands and floodplains in terms of retaining and storing water and providing habitat. It could be enhanced a bit, and by that I just mean any of the areas that are low could be made a little lower. You could have a little more storage in that overall area that's been outlined in the green dashes. One goal we had from the very beginning was to try to really connect a floodplain like this, or the agricultural field that we just talked about. And that can often be done. And the reason we haven't really gotten into saying, well, we're going to reconnect this entire floodplain, and so right at the bank, it's going to spill over into this floodplain and just utilize it completely, is that we have this, it's not mapped on here, but essentially where the trail is the existing sewer main running through the ground. And so we're not able to change the grade, the elevation of the land in these areas, because that I think it's a 3 or a 4 foot pipe is there in the ground. And so we're not proposing any changes to the location of that sewer pipe. And so that's going to limit some of the scale of an opportunity to really reconnect it to the river. So these things are possible. This location seems to be a low for this part of the neighborhood. And both times I was there, I saw ponded water in this corner here. And so I think there's an opportunity to create a bit of a low that would hold water a little more before it infiltrates and gets back into the groundwater system that's connected to the river.
Additionally, I have to admit, in this spot, this was right where that the lower part of the green infrastructure restoration area might be introduced. It would really lend itself to art in the park and maybe a sculptural treatment of that landscape. If you're making things a little bit lower and making things a little bit higher, there's already this sort of pillowed landscape there that could be exaggerated a bit and planted accordingly, and it would really become this exciting sculptural experience with a green water infrastructure. Just a lot of opportunity there, and for land, to introduce land art and possibly bring in or open it up as a spot where people might be invited to do interventions, or artists could do an installation that would be of interest, and keep that area engaging, even more so than just as a natural experience.
Thanks, Beth. So here we have that section. I would say the middle photograph on the, I don't know, none of these really do it justice, I guess. I found it to be really, there's some really large silver maple trees in there. It's a nice section that it doesn't really seem to require a whole lot of heavy lifting to at least initially establish a trail through there. So yeah, it's certainly wide enough for opportunities like benches. And the bottom photo is just an example of how forested floodplains, can really take on, store, infiltrate floodwaters. Okay, so down to our southernmost parcel in the project area. This is below Willow Road, east of Grannis, and kind of behind the IGA, and there's a gas station as well in that neighborhood. So Beth, do you want to cover the trails initially?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so starting again with parking, we saw an opportunity. There is the lot at the IGA. It's in close proximity to the proposed trail system. And so possibly there is a way to establish a usage agreement or an easement for a couple of spots behind the IGA that could be used for people visiting the trail system. Let's see, so coming down along the river here, a lot of this is already maintained for access to the sewer pipeline. But then as you move from north to south, right about at that area where we have our first branch off to the river depicted, things are a little less maintained. But what's exciting is that there's this opportunity to clean up some of the invasives there, because there were quite a few in this area, and to move through and engage the river for fishing, or just to loop around and make this a terminus in the overall, almost 2-mile stretch of trail. So this trail might also, like in other segments, go from high spot to high spot, with those connected with small pieces of, or small segments of boardwalk to get people across in the wet season. Maybe engage the restoration area so that it's a point of interest along the way. And then that orange circle there, that's identifying a location where we thought it might be an opportunity for a variety of fishing locations, possibly, a bench or two to have a moment of rest looking out over the river where it bends. It's also a pretty private spot back there because it's wooded, and it's a bit overgrown now. So there's that thickness to the vegetation that creates a nice natural immersion. On the southernmost part, there is a green arrow, and there is a possibility that that the trail could be extended out. The parcel down to the south is owned by, I'm sure as many or most of you know, the shooting range. And so because that's a forested area at that end of that property, there's the possibility of threading a trail through there via an easement. So we wanted to identify that as a possible extension. Additionally, we're not showing any connection into the neighborhood to the east, but like Michael mentioned earlier, where right-of-ways exist, or maybe there's an opportunity when discussing with the neighborhood, creating a point of entry. And the other reason here is that getting a point of entry to the east would require crossing the river itself, and that as an anchored truss bridge and not just a boardwalk over a wet spot. That's a significant investment, and so it would require some planning there to make that happen. But it's not on this slide because without an identified location to connect into that neighborhood, it just didn't make sense to propose that kind of infrastructure. But certainly is a possibility should that connection be possible. So I'll hand it over to you, Michael.
Okay. Yeah, so we, if you can see, that parcel has a very narrow, maybe it's 20 feet or 50-foot wide section that goes east to that neighborhood, that residential street. We looked at that, and it just feels too narrow to be comfortable for those neighbors to have that be something that we could propose as a trail. Doesn't mean that they wouldn't be, and maybe there's other places that people who live in the area know is unofficially already access to these parcels or that kind of thing. But again, we just saw parking at the IGA, even though that's not agreed to yet. There does seem to be space there, and an agreement could be explored for parking there, and the trail could head down. It's really quite nice down there, though it is incredibly overgrown in some places with multiflora rows. So there would need to be a little bit of management of that to at least initiate the trail. The restoration area is connected to the blue dashed line that you see coming in from Grannis Pond. So Grannis Pond goes into a pipe just, I think it's right, it's on the other side of North High Street, and then it's pretty much a buried stream until it comes out at the river. And we can look real quick at the next slide. That the bottom right, that's Elsa she measured the width of that pipe where the Grannis Pond outflow is coming into the Farm River. And what we have there is a section of pipe that's, well, the stream is buried, and then it comes out actually where the parcel begins. You can see that sort of this sharp corner where that stream is coming into the town property. It comes out of a pipe right there, and then it goes back into a pipe and comes out at the river. And where it comes out of that first pipe, we thought, well, what if this sort of wet mess of invasives and kind of a floodplain area could be accentuated a bit to really capture what's coming out of Grannis Pond and slow it down and sort of store it a bit in a wetland or a deeper, more regularly wet floodplain area. And then we could have it make its way to the river itself, either through infiltrating through the ground or over a surface, dedicated surface conveyance that the trails would have to navigate. But I think that would be the exciting thing, is the trail would take you through some uplands and then bring you into this restored area that would be addressing that flow. I think in regular conditions, like when we saw it, it's not a lot of flow, but in a storm system where Grannis Pond is filling up with water, all of that water is getting as fast as it can. Once it goes over the spillway at Grannis Pond, it's really going to be pumping down into the river, and we could see some erosion of the banks at the Farm River where that pipe was located there. And so that would be a good way to sort of keep water from hitting the Farm River as hard as it can in those storm events, and reduce potential flooding issues. I think we talked about all this. That shooting range is a challenge to creating a trailhead at the south end. It's state property, and it's not really inviting public access. And if you did get out and even got to North High Street, we also don't have a sidewalk or a parking area or anything like that to really take a pedestrian or a walker who parks safely out of that area. So in our concept on this go around, we couldn't really encourage a trailhead down there unless there was other valuable infrastructure for hikers or people who are going to be riding a bike or bringing a car to that trailhead. So again, just back to the existing conditions. On the far left, you can see the existing path that the Water Pollution Control Authority maintains. The river is quite nice here. It really gets quite broad, and the flow slows quite a bit. It's not as sort of narrow and rock, not as many rocks. It's much more of just sort of silt and sand, and very flat and broad. And so we're getting into that part of the watershed where the river really flattens out, and it really was historically more surrounded by fairly large floodplains on both sides, unless there were bedrock and things like that. This picture on the lower left next to Elsa is trying to show you some of the landscape, but you can just see the level of vegetation here. A lot of what you can see is multiflora rose, some invasive honeysuckles, and then in the background is a bit of Phragmites before you get to the tree line farther out near North High Street. And just a a last kind of interesting one is we saw some old signs of beaver chew. This tree has been chewed. It's still up, it's still living, but the tree was almost taken down by a beaver. It looks like that was many years ago. We didn't see any recent signs of beaver activity, but quite a lot of footprints of other wildlife. So it certainly is a wildlife corridor in addition to having other resources for the river. And again, just going back to these proposed elements that we could be including at this section of the river. I have heard that the river is stocked, but I'm just not sure where that could be. But this could be an area for fishing, or people who fish might know if it's a good area or not already. And this is quite an extensive boardwalk system. I think our concept is a little bit more of sections of high and low, where you'd have maybe some boardwalks like this, and then getting back to uplands that are either created or pre-existing at the site. So that was our run through of the concept. Have some time for questions here. Before we get into that, let me just say, if we finish up here with questions, or you need to cut out before you can really enjoy the discussion right now, Southwest Concept. Well, Chris, do you want to explain how you're running this?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Michael, and thanks, Beth, for the presentation. So we do want to get feedback from folks on the concepts as they were presented, and any other ideas that may not have been included tonight that could be potential for enhancing this area. And so what we've done is well, first we're going to share these slides and the recording, and the add your comments link is actually a Word file that you can download. It's posted on our website right now. It's just a table of the different areas. And if you have specific comments for like area 2, there's a box for that, and you could type some comments in, and then you can email those back to us at the district at that email address at swcd@conservect.org. Because we do want to hear what people think about this idea, and provide feedback on things that you think wouldn't work, or other things you'd want to see proposed for this area. Because we're really in the early concept portion of doing this, and we want this to be seen as a resource for the community of East Haven and the neighborhood. So hearing from folks in that area specifically, and everybody in East Haven, is really what we want to do as we move forward with this. So we can do comments now, and then we can take questions as people. And I see Kim has raised her hand, so I'll get you just 1 second, Kim. But you can also
Chris, is there a deadline for comments?
We were hoping to get written comments back within like the next week or two. I think, Michael, is the timeline we talked about, if I'm remembering that correctly. Just so that we can make some changes or any changes that are suggested to finalize these documents before we close out the grant funding and our final reporting. And then the big mission is to use some of these concept designs to pursue larger funding pools to phase into the project. So I would say within the next 2 weeks, which would be the second week of February, if I'm looking at the calendar right. And so what I'll do is, as I see people raising their hands, so I'll just call people out and recognize them to speak. And Michael and Beth, hopefully you can help with answering questions as they come in. Kim, you had your hand up first. Do you want to go?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Chris. I really appreciated the presentation this evening. I just wanted to let you know, Chris, that the East Haven Town Council was not able to meet this month in January, in part due to the high COVID numbers and cases in our town. There were some other issues that prevented us from having a meeting this month, but we are meeting. We are holding our regularly scheduled council meeting next week. So I just wanted to see, or is that the following week? Nope, next week. So I wanted to see if, I'd already talked to our council chairman and asked if we could talk about this project in the council meeting. So unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to this past month, but we're going to at the February meeting. It would be helpful. I know you just said that these slides would be available. Could you email me this presentation or tell me where I can download it from?
Yeah, Kim, I can certainly make sure that you get the materials after this is over.
That'd be great. Thank
we're-
you.
We know where the meeting's still recording, but we're going to post the recording as well, so that can be shared. We'll probably put it on our YouTube channel, but the slides themselves will also be posted as a PDF on our website, and so I can definitely share that link once it's uploaded.
Thank you. Thank you. And I've got to get my little one to sleep. So I'm probably going to jump off the Zoom call here in just a minute, but I do appreciate your time and looking forward to receiving those slides and looking forward to garnering more support, which I'm sure I will from the rest of the council. So thank you. Thank you all.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for
Thank
attending
you.
tonight, Kim.
Yeah, thanks, Kimberly.
All right, the next hand I see raised is Richard.
Good evening. How you doing? I'm
Good.
Rick Hurlbert with the Greater New Haven Water Pollution Control Authority. The only reason I want to jump in here is that we look forward to working with you here. I've been involved with that right-of-way clearing and the maintenance over the past several years. They just went through there, and it's important for us to keep access there for roughly 14 to 20 feet clearance to get a big truck in there. If we have to for an emergency, and that's why we clear that. But the clearing done on my end or on our end is done roughly every year to 2 years, depending on the growth. So if there's a trail in here, it works. We have one in the Farmington Canal where our sewer line runs along the Farmington Canal. So it is something that we can work together on, and we look forward to doing that. But even at one point, if you need somebody to walk from our company to walk the trail with you and see what we're doing over there, be more than happy to get somebody over there for you. Just let me know, get in touch with me, all right?
Yeah, that's awesome, Rick. I appreciate the insights and info, and we'll probably take you up on getting over there. I mean, I feel like I've been there a ton of times already, but I love the area, and I know Mike can attest. Since the first time we walked it, I've been pretty pumped up about the opportunities here.
Yeah.
Yeah, we clear actually all the way from I started several years back, and we go from the North Branford line up near Snake Hill Road all the way down to the back of the Home Depot on that trail.
Nice.
So some of my guys walked it more than I did, and I can always have one of them walk with you, but we'll get somebody over there for you. All right.
That's great. Looking forward to working with you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
I don't see anybody else's hands raised. If anybody else has any questions for Michael or Beth, we can certainly go through them now. Mario, go ahead.
Chris, thank you. Just to reiterate what Rick had said, we look forward at the Greater New Haven Water Pollution Control Authority to work with you. This is really exciting, especially for me, because I think Barbara Brow probably recalls in 2006 or so, we actually, through COG, created this as a trail. So it's great to see this as that was the town of East Haven. So it's great to see this being enhanced as you all are proposing, and being a whole lot more accessible. So we look forward to working with you. Thank you.
And Mario, I do remember quite well, and I'm delighted that this is in concept stages and pretty soon to go forward.
Yeah, no, it's great. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks for your input.
Thank you, Mario.
Thanks.
All right, Carl, I see you have your hand up.
I do. Thank you very much for that great presentation. I'm Carl Honkinen. I work for the USDA Forest Service, State and Private Forestry, and I've been following your activity on the Farm River for a bit now. This is really one of the first times I've had a chance to engage with what you're doing. I just wanted to throw out a couple of things from my perspective as a watershed forester with the Forest Service. First of all, I applaud you for focusing on green stormwater infrastructure. It's important that people understand how we manage stormwater. It just doesn't go into a pipe and goes away. We have to understand how it's treated and how to best remove nutrients and sediments before it enters these precious waterways that we all hope to enjoy more with this type of a greenway. The other thing I'd like to congratulate you on is bringing recreation to people. And this is no more important now than it ever has been in this pandemic that we're facing, where people are, in many cases, working from home and seeking new recreational experiences. By providing this type of greenway access to the residents of this community, I think you're providing a very valuable link to outdoor opportunities. And the one analogy I'll give you came from our chief of the Forest Service, who back in the beginning of the pandemic explained the crush of recreational activity that we're seeing in our national forests. And he explained it that, you know, every day is like a weekend, and every weekend is like the 4th of July. We're seeing so many people wanting to get out of the house and stretch their legs, go for a run, just get some air. And this kind of opportunity, I think, is critical. And the last thing I'll say is connecting riparian zones to the river and to people to get them to understand the importance of a riparian zone is important, because that's really your first opportunity to intercept potential pollutant sources from entering a local water body. So your ideas of regenerative stormwater conversion is a great one, and daylighting those failed gray infrastructure components with green infrastructure that may allow more natural vegetation and aquatic organism passage is great. So please keep up your good work. I'll keep an eye on this and appreciate the chance to comment. I'll send you a few more comments as well, but I'll cut it off for now. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks,
thank you,
Carl.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I
would
thought
say
I-
just
Go
the
ahead.
long-term investment here is, as Carl says, bringing people to the river, getting them interested in the river, then invested in the river, and then they're going to want to be part of the protection and the restoration and the stewardship. And so it's a long-term and very successful investment, I think.
Don't see anybody else's hand raised to speak. I thought there was somebody else, but maybe they put their hand down. If anybody else has any other questions, this is the time to ask now, or we definitely will be accepting the written comments as well. And everybody that registered, we will actually send those links directly to you after they're posted on our website. So you're going to get an email from us with the slides and the information for the feedback sheet as well. It's pretty quiet. I think they were just amazed
I have a
with what
question,
you
actually.
proposed.
David, is that a picture of the river, of the Farm River?
Yes, it's the Farm River, North Branford.
Excellent.
Not this winter. There's no snow.
Okay, I was gonna say, was it today?
Maybe Saturday.
I was gonna say it's
Yeah.
a picture from the future.
Right. It's a few hours from now.
I just thought it was very promising that ironically enough, there's a sewer easement that goes all the way to North Branford. And maybe there's a way of making a trail connection to North Branford, because we have a lot of open space around our town, around the Farm River.
In our review of the entire watershed for potential restoration or green infrastructure sites, we did see this pattern elsewhere, and I think it was farther north in North Branford, and where there would be town-owned parcels along the river. And so we didn't explore those, but I think you're onto something, that maybe this is potentially a phase one of a larger initiative for all of the river, or certain sections that could be connected. That'd be great.
Does
Oh,
anybody-
Aaron just gave a comment. That's a very interesting idea, just a connection to the Shoreline Greenway Trail at the Farm River State Park. That would be an exciting connection as well.
Mhm. I think there's a lot of opportunities, you know, and I don't know if it was Michael or Beth who said the backbone or and then having other trails kind of go off of that. So I think it's a great, lot of potential.
Yeah, and it's really quite beautiful. I mean, if the invasives were not so dominant in certain places, I think you'd feel like that throughout the whole area. It's a great resource. You're really lucky to have, especially in a fairly densely populated area. Usually these kinds of areas have already been totally built out. So the fact that the sewer main, you know, accidentally helped to protect this area it's really a great opportunity. So we should do something. We should take action. Not to put
Yeah, if I could
pressure
add
on.
something too, you know, natural areas are often kind of messy. I mean, yes, we want to get rid of the invasives like bittersweet and multiflora rose and such, but I might make one more comment on your green stormwater infrastructure. One of the practices that we like to employ is called chop and drop, where we actually cut trees down and leave them in a stormwater detention area or in a floodplain, so that it actually intercepts the flow, slows the water down, and creates riffles and pools in appropriate areas where aquatic organisms can migrate to and create cover in. So don't be afraid to mess things up a little in your stormwater, because that's what nature does.
Yes, we have beavers and large woody debris. We could really go far with some of that. I agree 100%. That's an excellent idea. I never heard that term. Thank you for saying that, chop and drop.
Yeah, the chop and drop. Chris, it looks like somebody still has their hand.
Yamil, just raised their hand. Would you like to ask a question?
Yes, good evening. I guess I have more of a concern, I guess, I live on Canton Horn Drive, right behind where the cornfield is. I guess one of the main concerns that I would have would be not only privacy, which I you guys did talk about in one of the slides. It would be, I guess, how can we prevent people from, especially like overnight, coming onto the properties? That would be a concern for us. The trail being so close to our houses. I think safety is obviously a big issue when it comes to having a public way right behind the properties like that. And, what mitigations could be put in place to, I guess you can't mitigate it all, but that's definitely one of my main concerns when considering the trail right behind our homes, is a safety issue for us, at least in my family.
Definitely. And, those concerns are very real when you're introducing a trail system through a residential area. Safety can be accomplished in a number of different ways, but one of the things that would need to be balanced along this trail and designed into the fabric of it is very carefully selected and carefully placed vegetative screens, so that you're not creating cover for crime, but you're creating enough cover for or enough privacy for residents, but not so much cover that you're creating locations where crime can be carried out. And so balancing that along the trail and being cognizant of each of the conditions along the way as it gets designed and the landscape developed would be paramount, absolutely critical. Where the residential neighborhood touches the trail system, especially, in the places where the trail is bordered by woods and then the river separates it from the neighborhood, I think that you have your best security conditions, because the river will act as a natural barrier. But there are locations where the trail passes directly adjacent to residential properties. And so fencing can be used or, carefully placed vegetation. If it came to it in those locations, there's all kinds of security measures that are available, like camera systems or motion activated lighting, or even motion activated camera systems. Although in a corridor that's as heavily trafficked by wildlife, you're not really going to want to put that in, or else you'll have a lot of footage. But motion lights and things along those lines can be helpful if they're used and positioned in a place that creates safety but doesn't create a nuisance for the neighborhood either, because a light that comes on to illuminate a trail sometimes shines right into somebody's bedroom window. But all of these techniques, there's a suite of techniques that can be used, and there are some critical areas along this path that would require security analysis on them and safety analysis.
I appreciate you guys' time, and I do agree as far as getting the water flowing through there, because I know, for instance, it hasn't happened a lot per the neighbors. I'm pretty new to the neighborhood. I've been only here for 3 years now, and it's flooded pretty substantially. A handful of times where the water's come up at least 50% of my backyard, which is pretty substantial considering the size yard that I have. And getting that water to move and disperse in another way would be a big help to this area, just to save our properties, so I appreciate what you guys are doing. I appreciate the answers.
Thank you. I really appreciate both your comments. We spent a lot of time before this, and then when we were at the site thinking about neighbors' comfort or concerns. So just the fact that you brought that up, I really appreciate that, because that makes us think more clearly and more detailed, like Beth was talking about. And then your second comment about having flooding, that's Farm River has a history of flooding going back many decades, and it's really helpful to have local residents near the river comment on any experiences they have with that, to try to help create ways that we can improve that. So trying to find a way that this project could work and address both of your comments is extremely important. But thanks.
Chris, it's Jonathan. Can you hear me?
Jonathan, yep, you're good. Go ahead.
Great project, as you know, I fully support it. Just anything in this study or at this point, gonna start looking at funding for future work on this project? Or is that not in this study?
So I'll try to tackle that one first, and then Michael and Beth, if you want to chime in. I think that the district in doing this was getting these concepts and designs to have an idea to go to larger funding sources for implementation and installation, but we haven't gotten to that point because I wanted to have these plans in hand and these kind of visuals in hand as part of an application for future funding. So, I'm committed to have the district continue working on this project beyond these concepts and actually, start pursuing the larger bags of money so that the trail can actually start being built and some of the green infrastructure can start to be built and all the components that Michael and Beth talked about tonight.
There seems to be a lot of federal money coming out for a lot of different projects, and I know parks and acquisition for park land and stuff is quite available out there. So I think it's something, if we could move as quickly as possible, probably better shot at it. That's all.
Yeah, Jonathan, I'd be glad to have another conversation with you about maybe a specific source. And I feel like most of my job right now is putting in applications and reporting on grants. So let's add another one to the pile.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
That's true. We would not be sitting here right now if not for Chris. moving the
Yeah.
ball
Sure.
on this idea. So thank you, Chris.
The U.S. Forest Service does have a community forest grants program. I'm not sure if you have parcels that would be appropriate for that, but it's something that you should take a look at.
Thanks, Carl. I'll check that out.
CT Deep just issued their urban forest as well. Grant.
Excellent. I love all these ideas. Right, nobody else has their hands raised. Definitely will be taking written comment. It is 8:35. So I'll do last chance for any more spoken questions and then call it a night. Going once. Going twice. All right, well, so at that point, I just want to thank Michael and Beth for putting this presentation together for us, and thank everybody that attended tonight and provided feedback and input. Jonathan for being a great partner with the town and the Greater New Haven Green Fund. Thanks for the funding to get us to this point, and I definitely will be moving the district to try to keep us going forward with this project, and looking forward to any other comments and feedback that come in. And at this point, I will wish everybody a good night and thank you for coming out tonight.
Thank you, Chris.
Have a good one, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Melissa. We'll talk soon.